I landed from a conference out of state. When I landed for that conference, I had an email saying the conference was canceled. We started watching the country shut down and scrambling to get on a flight back home. I landed and came into the office to deploy my team, shut the office down for what we thought was maybe 2 weeks to a month at that time. But I stood back, and that disaster philanthropy part of my brain kicked right in and said, we are going to need a team. I bought a Zoom account when I didn't even know what Zoom was. And within 24 hours, we had the very first team call of what became the community leadership team to say, what do we see? Who do we need? We used the relationships in the community to build that team, because there are two kinds of currency in a community. There's financial currency, which we all know and recognize, but the second kind of currency is relational. And when you build relationships in what I call blue sky time, before the storm or between the storms, those relationships are what you cash in on when the dark sky comes.
We put together this community leadership team that, again, Sarah took the lead on it. But we kept pulling all these people together, and it really kind of served as a support group for many of us in leadership roles in the community, trying to figure out what the heck is going to happen next, and how do we prepare for that. We also had lots of discussions on what is everybody hearing out in the community, who needs help. Kind of always trying to be one step and try to manage the virus instead of having the virus manage us.
Because our community was really in a world of unknowns, and I felt so good. Again, every Tuesday at 3:30, we were on the call, and I don't think we missed any for the first 6 months. And I remember the calls early on, and what was our issue, what was our crisis this week we had to fix. And again, everything from education to school lunches to childcare, how do we keep them going? Everything from PPE, how do we keep people in addiction and support circles? How do we get them more technology and iPads? How do we do this? And we were brainstorming like never before.
And individual organizations often can't solve all those problems on their own, but when you get these leaders and these organizations to come together, wonderful things happen, and just these brainchilds come through, and you know, these aha moments of here's the things we can help fix, and if we all take our pieces that we're experts in, we can change lives really quickly. And it's really amazing and powerful to be able to be in those groups and to be a part of that change.
I mean, when we started this group of getting together, we didn't know what we didn't know, and we didn't know what we were going to learn. And at the end of the day, we had once a week, we problem solved, and the right person was put to the right solution, and that solution was poured out into the community.
The schools were working on their plan for closing, and they were closing right before spring break, the Friday before spring break. And we found out that there would be absolutely no lunch food service for the next week, breakfast or lunch for these kids. And after that week, the school would pick back up. But we were going to have a week gap where kids wouldn't be fed if they didn't have food within their house. It was a very busy week. We distributed 5 days of breakfast and lunches to these children, distributing over 14,000 meals, and all pulled together in less than 4 days. If it wasn't for the way this community leadership team could activate people in a moment's notice, this wouldn't have gotten done.
The community leadership team was instrumental in the success that UCAP had during the pandemic, not only because of the ideas that the leadership team would sit around that table brainstorming ideas, not just ideas, but identifying needs. What are some providers seeing? What are some not? How can we work on this together? By being a part of that leadership circle, it allowed us also access to funding that we possibly would not have been privy to had we not been around that table, as far as their response funds that UCAP was a recipient of, and was able to help hundreds of families in new ways with unrestricted funding, because the community leadership team allowed us to identify the needs and supported us in the needs that we saw with the families we were serving and didn't box us into what their funding requirements were, but allowed the flexibility of their funding around what the needs of the families were.
So now with CCT's help, we're able to identify a decent demographic of those seniors and get them meals and whatnot. But now who's checking in on them? And, mental health has a completely different view now than it did when, Paul Wellstone brought up the idea publicly, back all those years ago. And so, to have something like the senior line, so they just kind of call and chat and how you doing and things like that, very, very important for our area and our seniors.
So pretty much within the first couple months of them probably meeting, Woodland Centers was invited to the table to come and talk about mental health. And one week, Mayor Merv Calvin said, there is such a need for the aging population who cannot leave their homes, their family can't see them. What can we do to support them? And I went back and talked to Dr. Chose and I said, is there a way for us to go after Willmar Community Foundation, a grant dollar, so that we can put a therapist at Copperleaf? And we were able to do that. That grant then made us think, across our 7 counties, there are more entities that need our help. So we went after a larger grant from the Minnesota River Area Agency on Aging, and we were able to serve 8 entities, independent living, assisted living, and actually some HUD housing apartments. That just ended now at the end of this month, or end of September, and now we have 4 of those 8 seeking their own grant dollars to continue working with us and bringing our staff in to provide those support groups. So that is the power of, it starts with an idea, it moves into implementation, and then it's like, let's go see who else and where can we find the dollars to make this happen. And that truly is the power of the collaborative effort.
The initial conveners talk about who's missing, what do we need to bring to the table. And when they come to the table, I don't think anybody's sitting around there going for the glory. They want to sit down, get something done, make a difference in the community, and move on.
At that point, masks were starting to be talked about, keeping your face covered, not touch your face, things like that. So we started a program called Sew for Safety. So with some help from the foundation, with a grant to kind of get that seed started, we reached out to quilting groups and church groups and whatnot, and Joanne Fabrics, places like that, and started to work on getting supplies and getting people sewing masks. And it pretty quickly it broke down to 1 or 2 styles, and then they started coming in. In less than a year, we've delivered over 50,000 masks. Now, not all of those are handmade, but the first 5 months worth were all handmade, and we're getting calls from companies from not hospitals but clinics, nursing homes, places that had they were that second tier list.
A semi, actually we had 1 semi and a little short semi that came once, and they would bring anywhere from produce, dairy, there was milk, there was cheese, there was potatoes, that type of thing, and we would advertise it, maybe 2-3 weeks in advance of the event. And we had people, we served, I think we were going to do 800 households. That first distribution event, it was gone before, we still had a line coming down Alena Avenue, and it was gone. So without the help of this leadership team, those events would not have been possible. The connections that I made through that team got me the Rotary Club to do traffic control. I would never have imagined. I would never imagine 800 cars in the YMCA parking lot down Alena Avenue, almost to First Street. They just rolled with it. They have expertise from Rockin' Robbins. They just handled it. One less thing for me to worry about. I just had to get the volunteers that would pack the items and put them in the vehicles. So it was like an assembly line. The milk was here, the cheese was here, the cereal was here. A volunteer would they would have their trunks open and put it in the cars as they went, and out the door they went. People were scared. They didn't know what was going on, what was going to happen in the future. So this food and what we could do as a team, all the volunteers, the leadership team, made a huge difference in many lives that we, to this day, probably don't know how impactful we were. But just those, like I said, the virtual hugs, the God bless yous, they meant a lot.
So we needed people who had both positional and organizational influence, but we also needed people who were well-spoken. They were known for steady thinking. I really wanted that team to be a warm, welcoming place so that you could be there as long as you felt it was helpful to you. Maybe when we solved or worked on your issue, you stepped away from the table, but you were welcome back anytime. And most of the team members stayed with us the entire time. When I did the math the other day, it's almost 12,000 man-hours that were gifted from community organizations and individuals who sat on that community leadership team from March of 2020 until now, because the team still meets on a monthly or quarterly basis as needed going forward. So this is a massive effort, and it's a massive investment into our community and helping our community be the resilient place that we know it needed to be to come through COVID.
What this local community is able to provide its families is like none other. The leadership buys in, the state and government agencies buy in, nonprofits, churches, everybody works together to ensure the best holistic approach to community and defining community the best we can than any other community that I've experienced.
Really want to thank the community for stepping up in so many ways. I don't know of another community in the state of Minnesota that did the heavy lifting we did and were as nimble as we were when we rolled out our program. We have a core group of people that get together on a regular basis that brainstorm, look to the future, and look at how can we make Willmar better. It's just unbelievable the giving that happens within this community. And you're all a part of that. You all make that happen.